Welcome to Biology Made Easy. Today we are starting to do some series on field and laboratory work. You know, in the lab, you need specimen that is stored, that from time to time it can be used or worked on further. So in today's lesson, we are going to look at the precautions that you need and the precautions that the organisms you are going to collect need. So we are going to look at safety precautions for you that are going to collect the specimens, and then safety precautions for the organisms that you are taking into the lab. Well, everyone needs to be very careful in unfamiliar places. You may need the help of experienced field worker. That's one of the safety precautions. So for you, these are some of the precautions. Precaution from snakes. Check our lesson on characteristics of snakes and how to avoid them. You need great precautions from snakes. Then precautions in muddy places. One can get stuck in mud or sink in holes or slide. And you know there are sinkholes. Sinkholes can be anywhere. A hole that when one gets in, it leads into big open spaces underground. So one needs to watch, not even in muddy places, but all places, one needs to watch where your foot lands, because it can land into a hole that you can slip in and get lost. So precautions for you. Then precaution on slopes. One can slide or slip on rocks or rocky places. So one needs to be careful. And then one needs to be careful at intertidal zone of the sea. The intertidal zones, when the tide is low tide, rocks are exposed. And one needs to be careful on rocks, because you have a rock here, you have another rock here, you have rocks, and as you are busy collecting specimen or busy studying specimen, there's no water, the rocks are exposed, and if you are here busy looking at rocks and looking at things, you want to move from this rock to that rock, you have to be very careful that you don't slip in between rocks. No matter how small the gap between the rocks are, these are rocks, don't let your foot touch here when you don't know the depth of the water, because in between some rocks is a deep gaping hole, which when you fall in, you are gone. So careful on intertidal zone rocks at low tide when the rocks are exposed. Your foot should not be in water in between rocks. You don't know how deep the depths are. So careful. Then careful at intertidal zones. At low tide, as we have said, the rocks and the sand are exposed, big, and as one works, one can forget that the time that the high tide will come. So one can dangerously get encircled by high tide as it moves in, and one can see high tide all over and encircling you because you are glued on working for hours. So one should be careful that one is not encircled by high tide waves. Yes, so now we are going to look at safety precautions for the organisms you are collecting. And one of it is transporting live organisms. We are going to look at it. Transporting dead organisms, different species of organisms. We are going to talk about different sizes or ages of organisms, few organisms, return organisms, habitat kept. What does all this mean? Well, one of the things that one needs to do when transporting live organisms is that the organisms should be transported under their natural living conditions. Natural living conditions, i.e., some in fresh water or others in seawater. Well, if you are transporting those that are in soil, in all this, you need to keep temperatures, you need to keep water content, you need to keep air, oxygen for the organisms. So the organisms being transported live, natural living conditions should be kept for the organisms. For instance, if you are transporting wood lice, you know they live in the soil. So you pick them with the soil, and here's the wood lice in the soil, and they don't mind because they don't mind air or anything, they hide in the soil. And then if you are transporting snails, they can move out. So you have a container with a little soil in it. It should be moist. They like moisture, and the snails are in here. The top of this should be perforated so that the snails can have air, and it should be cool enough so that the snails don't die. So the temperatures, water content, air, all is important when transporting live organisms under their natural living conditions must be maintained. Then, when you are transporting dead organisms, the organisms, when they are picked and they die, they should be put in solutions that keep them not rotting. And so, tiny organisms can be put in 70% alcohol, tiny organisms like insects. Large ones should be put in formaldehyde. That keeps the organisms preserved right in the field before it gets into the lab. Then different species of organisms should be put into different containers. If you put different species of organisms into containers, one can eat the other. For instance, we have hermit crabs should not be transported with seaweeds like our water lettuce. We need the hermit crabs. We also need the seaweeds. They should be put in different containers. If they are put into the same container, the hermit crabs will be eating the seaweeds. So different species of organisms in different containers. And then different sizes and different ages of organisms should also be put into different containers, because big ones may trample on the small ones, and then big ones, when they are angry, may eat the small ones. So different sizes, different ages of organisms in different containers. And then few organisms should be taken. Check our video on genetic diversity. Not many organisms should be taken from the environment, the habitat. The species may be left with very few variety. And so when taking organisms out to be sent into the lab, to be stored, to be used for studies and further studies, only a few organisms should be taken from the habitat so that we don't get the organisms endangered. There may be very few of that variety. Please check our lesson on genetic diversity. Then many organisms should be returned back. So the organisms should be returned to the habitat. Organisms that have been taken live, studied, notes have been made upon them enough, they should be returned back into the habitat, and they should be put exactly where they were taken from the habitat. So when the organisms are being taken, notes are being done as to where they are taken from, so the organisms can be returned back into the habitat. And then the habitat must be kept undisturbed. Undisturbed vegetation should not be trampled upon and messed up. Stones that have been turned upside down should be put at the right place. Logs should be replaced so that the habitat is not disturbed, so that the organisms living in it, the various species, will still live comfortably, and then the ecosystem continues to be maintained so we don't lose organisms. This is where we end for today. If the lesson has been useful, please give us your likes and do subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. Goodbye.